Lane Kiffin had some really spicy things to say at SEC Media Day about the current state of college football with the transfer portal and the NIL being around now. So Lane Kiffin, he started his opening statements at SEC Media Day saying that it's a phenomenal thing that players are allowed to get paid. He doesn't have anything wrong with players getting compensated. Where Lane Kiffin has a problem with is how the NIL thing is being used to pretty much buy players from the portal, which pretty much has made the transfer portal college football's equivalent to NFL free agency. And Lane Kiffin said that the NIL, name, image, and likeness, has pretty much created a pay-for-play system that, of course, him and Ole Miss are going to take advantage of because it's legal and it's within the rules to do so. But he feels like this has led college football to becoming more like professional sports, where players end up becoming free agents and they have the right to sign with any team they want to. And the fact that you look at these recruits coming out of high school, the fact that they're being offered a lot of money to play college football for certain colleges for a set amount of money that ends up being a lot of dollars, you end up having a lot of issues that comes along with that. You remember the whole Jalen Rashada incident at Florida? I think this is a prime situation that Lane Kiffin is a little bit alluding to when it comes to the issues that comes with allowing players to get paid for their name, image, and likeness and allowing them to have more mobility. He also said that the difference between, their version of free agency versus the professional model is that professionals have contracts. You just can't up and leave a team just because you want to if you're still under contract. In college football, however, as long as you can transfer within the set dates of the transfer portal cycle, you can transfer to as many schools as you want to. I know somebody who I went to school with, who I played ball with, who's transferred to literally 4 different schools and over the last 5 to 6 years. How the hell can you transfer to 5, 6 schools? I don't even know how that's permitted. And the thing with the NCAA is that they don't step in and take control of these types of situations. They allow these situations to magnify and get worse and worse and worse until the situation gets so bad where they have no choice but to step in. So when you look at Lane Kiffin's comments, I definitely understand his frustrations, and you can't make it seem like, oh, he's just mad because he can't use the transfer portal and NIL as well as these other schools, because Ole Miss has been really active in the transfer portal over the last 2 years. Hell, they got Jackson Dart out of the transfer portal from USC last year. So I don't think that Lane Kiffin has any grievances about the utilization of the transfer portal. Really, it's with the fact that you're trying to incentivize players to transfer to said school by using NIL as a persuasion tactic. And it never was intended to be that way. It was never intended to be used that way. Now, even though Lane Kiffin doesn't have any problem with, players utilizing the transfer portal and transferring, he doesn't like the fact that coaches are using the portal to overhaul their rosters in big numbers, i.e. Deion Sanders, i.e. Kenny Dillingham with Arizona State. When you think about what the transfer portal was intended for, it was to allow players to find other opportunities if it wasn't working out. But it seems like all these players do is just hip hop to different schools every single chance the new transfer portal period opens up. And he also said that the current state of college football is a disaster. When you look at what's been going on with name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal, it's made college football a little bit like professional football, pretty much. And he even alluded to something that Josh Pate and a couple of other prominent college football talking heads have been saying about where the direction this sport can go. To these high school athletes, when they end up going to college, they don't end up getting scholarships anymore because they end up being viewed and treated as legitimate employees for said university that they commit to. So you don't give them a free education anymore because you now make them employees. And by making them employees, you basically make this more of a semi-professional league pretty much. And that's something that Lane Kiffin kind of alluded to. And that's kind of how he feels the direction that this sport probably is going to head. Now, I wouldn't like college football or college athletics in general to go in that direction. I do think that going to college, getting a free education definitely is priceless. It's something that you definitely can't put a price tag on. But if you're treating these college athletes like employees and they're signing contracts and they're getting salaries, then it's no need to cover their education anymore because look at what they're getting paid. They're employees now. They can pay for their own schooling. They can pay for their housing, their tuition, and anything else that gets covered with an athletic scholarship. College football, when I look at the transfer portal, I'm not one of those people that get mad over it. I'm not one of those people that if you see one of my favorite players from one of my favorite schools transferring out saying, oh, these players are weak. They just running from competition. They looking for the easy way out. Like, I don't really care who transfers, who doesn't transfer out. Like, at the end of the day, to me, college football is still college football. When the final whistle gets blown, that's when college football ends up being what it is off the field. But on the field, for 60 minutes that they're trying to knock each other out and trying to tackle each other to the ground, it's still college football. You're still going to have the same mascots. You're still going to have the same fans. The game is still going to be played the same way. So I'm not really too upset about, you know, the current state of the transfer portal and NIL and how it has impacted the sport. But it has made it way more difficult to cover and keep up with college football. It's like you got to make sure you do your research before you talk about any team in college football because you got to know who's on their roster. Because some of the guys that you may have thought was on the roster last week might be playing for a different team next week. So when you think about the Sam Hartman situation, I don't like how that went. I don't like how there were a lot of reports before Wake Forest bowl game that Sam Hartman was already thinking about leaving the program. And these reports came out before Wake Forest bowl game with Sam Hartman, where it was already reported that he was transferring to Notre Dame. Now, I was looking at those reports hoping that it wasn't true, thinking that this was just a bunch of rumors and speculation on Twitter and that nothing was going to become of it. But then, right after the bowl game, a couple hours later, Sam Hartman is in the transfer portal, or a couple of days later, whenever he entered the portal. It didn't take too long for him to end up at Notre Dame after these rumors came up. So I didn't really like that. I don't like what allegedly happened with Jordan Addison, pretty much USC tampering, getting him to leave Pitt to join Caleb Williams at USC. The thing that I have with the transfer portal is that I don't think that other schools should be contacting players that are members of other teams trying to recruit them to enter the portal just so they can join their team and incentivizing them to transfer using NIL. I think that that's not really what that should be used for. It shouldn't be used as a mechanism to steal other players or try to incentivize other players to leave their current situations, because you're kind of putting kids in a little bit of a bad position. Because imagine if you end up taking a player off the University of Wisconsin and you tell him to come transfer to Nebraska and that you're going to have a good NIL package waiting for him, and then he transfers, he ups and leaves Wisconsin, he goes to Nebraska, and then he isn't good. And then he isn't getting any playing time. And the reason why you got him in the first place to leave his previous school is because you promised them not just a good NIL bag, but you're also giving him another opportunity, and yet he takes the money, but yet isn't really getting the same amount of playing time that he was at his previous school. Then that kid is in a situation where after that NIL deal runs out, he has to enter the portal again and transfer to another situation, and that potentially could be the end of his career, because a lot of these guys who enter the transfer portal, the harsh reality is that most of them do not get picked up. I know a handful of guys from the city of Jacksonville that entered the transfer portal and they haven't been heard from again. The transfer portal is a really dangerous game. Not just from what these schools are doing, using NIL to entice players to leave their current program to join theirs, or using NIL and high school recruiting. Like, we've seen some really ugly high school recruiting stories that have involved NIL. And I'm going to go back to the Jalen Rashada incident once again, because I think it's one of the prime examples that Lane Kiffin was talking about of why he has the feelings towards the name, image, and likeness and transfer portal that he currently has, because of situations similar to what happened with the Gators and Jalen Rashada. So when you have this whole NIL transfer portal argument, it doesn't seem like coaches are against players having mobility and, you know, schools having the ability to pay players and players having the ability to get compensated. But it's the fact that you don't have anybody overlooking this thing. You don't have any limitations on how often you can use the transfer portal or how much money you can pay a player. There's nobody overseeing college football to make sure that everything plays out well, everything functions correctly. It's just all chaos out there with the NIL deals and transfer portal movement. There's a player that just entered the transfer portal right now. Literally, just got a notification on my phone. Somebody has just entered the transfer portal again. The transfer portal needs some limitations. There needs to be some checks and balances to name, image, and likeness in the transfer portal for us to have a better functioning offseason when it comes to college football. You see, the offseason in college football is pretty much in chaos right now when it comes to coaches and teams, because you don't know who's going to stay in your team, who's going to transfer out, because if one guy transfers out or you have a mass exodus of players that transfer out, you got to go ahead and hit that portal to get some of those roster spaces filled up, to make sure that you still have depth enough or enough depth to fill the team come this season. So you look at Lane Kiffin's statements criticizing NIL and the transfer portal and how he feels it currently has made college football a disaster. I agree with him. I mean, I don't have the same frustrations that Lane Kiffin has with the portal and NIL verbatim. My problem just is that I think that players should have the mobility to move around, but they shouldn't have the freedom to just, every time they don't win a starting job, oops, I'm in the portal again. This one player, I forgot where he was last at. I can't remember his name. I think his name is Storm Duck or something like that. I think he now plays for Penn State. But the last time I recalled, I thought he was playing for UNC. I thought he was still playing for North Carolina. And now he's with Penn State. So, the transfer portal, I have some pros, but I also have a lot of cons when it comes to the transfer portal process. Yes, I love the fact that players have mobility. They have the freedom to go to another situation and they feel like the current one that they're in is not working out for them. If they get homesick like AD Mitchell, I can understand that. But if you're going into year 5 and you played on 5 different teams every single year that you've been in college, there is a problem. You're breaking the system. The transfer portal was not intended to be used this way. There are players like JT Daniels who've played for 3 different schools. USC, Georgia, West Virginia, and now going into this season, he's on his 4th school. He's playing for Rice. Rice. We got to do something about the transfer portal. We have to do something about NIL. Now, not every team is opening the checkbook to get every single recruit that they want, and I don't think that every recruit that commits to said school is doing it for NIL reasons. There are still players out there that I talk to that still commit to schools because they love the schools and not just for the money. So you guys let me know your thoughts on this Lane Kiffin NIL transfer portal issue that he has. What are your thoughts on the current state of college football when it comes to how NIL and the transfer portal are impacting the current state of the sport today?